Hello, friends. Greetings. This is your show, Manage Better. I am your host, Anshuman Tiwari. Welcome to the show once again. To the regular audience, welcome again. To the new audience, hope you like the show, and we will be able to make sure that your next hour or so is a good investment that you will be proud of. So, little bit about the show as we get in. First, a little shout out from people on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook. If you can see us live and hear us well, any issues, I can see that Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, all three are up. But do let me know where you are joining from and what are you expecting in the show, and I will get going with this show. So, a few comments started coming in. So, thank you very much. And just a little alert from, let me check, is LinkedIn on? I seem to think it is. Yeah. So all good, all three platforms good. Just a little check before we get going because the last thing I want is that we are in the show and somebody says, "Hey, you are not on YouTube or you are not on LinkedIn." So while we are living in a technology-enabled world, it has its ways of failing us. But with that, let's get a little deeper into the show. Firstly, thank you very much. We are grateful that you can give your time today. And getting a little deeper into the show, we are truly living in a digital age now, and it's getting even more digital each year, right? So, if last 2 years you thought that the digital thing has progressed, wait for it. This year will be even more. Right? So, and process automation is a key part of all this change, right? There are various components. Process automation and the related methods are a key part of this change. Like I said in the promo to the show, there's estimation that over 50% of the jobs that we know as we do today, right? So the way they are done today might be automated in the next 3 to 5 years. Digest it a little bit. 50% of the jobs could become automated in the next 3 to 5 years, right? Of course, that doesn't mean that everything will be shiny and golden, but it will have its own problems. And all this has implications for people's careers, companies, countries, societies, and whatnot, right? So we will discuss all of this today, and I will now invite my co-host and dear friend Hassan, Syed Hassan. Hi, Hassan. And
Yeah,
a little bit introduction for you. So Hassan is quite popular in the technology space, but let me give you a quick introduction. Hassan is a global technology leader and a business executive, and he looks younger, but he has over 25 years of experience. Very passionate about technology, an expert in and acclaimed speaker in this artificial intelligence and industrial revolution 4.0 space, leading academic and also very popular in industry forums. As a deep interest, he is interested in physics and has a recent book launch, the first launch, Origin of Rocketry. I would recommend those who are interested in reading to check that book out. Extremely interesting book around the origin of how rockets started, and it is a little counter to the currently available knowledge. Well researched book, uh, and of course, his main interest remains in technology. He speaks about technology, and the book was recently launched. I think last month, Hassan.
that's right.
Yeah,
In
so
January.
last
Yeah.
month, and already received huge accolades and is doing really well. So, Hassan, over to you for some brief introduction and then taking forward the show.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Anshuman, for inviting me here and all the kind words about me and the book. Okay, thanks a lot. And let me again introduce everyone like how Anshuman does. Hello, everyone. Yeah. So thanks again for joining today. So in the talk, okay, with Ian Barkin, okay, we will cover three topics. Number one, how can automation enable creation of a better world, okay, better businesses and improve customer experience? That will be our topic number one. Okay, how does it enable? Number two, how to implement automation, okay, in businesses, including, okay, the challenges and preparing for the transformation. So number three, enabling is great, implementing is great, but how can society be reinvented with automation, including both the views, the optimistic view that automation will create more jobs, okay, and the pessimistic view that it is going to lead to job losses. So we'll talk about all three. So to talk about all of whatever we just said, okay, we have Ian Barkin, okay, our special guest today, okay, who's one of the world's top experts on automation, and he's the co-author of the book titled Intelligent Automation, okay, which is the most influential book I would say in this space. Ian is an entrepreneur, he's an investor, he's an educator, he's a speaker, and a business executive. So maybe Anshuman, next time, okay, in the next talk with Ian, we should ask him what he's not. Okay, if he's all ticking all these boxes. So Ian co-founded Symphony Ventures and was the company being acquired by Sykes. He was also the chief strategy and marketing officer at Sykes. So Ian specializes again in many things: robotic process automation, strategy consulting, innovation, transformation design, okay, and execution. Ian, thank you for being with us today. It's always a pleasure to meet you. Okay, without further ado, let me hand it over to you, Ian, for your opening remarks.
Outstanding. Hassan, thank you so much. Anshuman, thanks a million for having me on the show. Thanks for that intro. I don't know who that guy was, but he sounded pretty great that you just discussed. And I love that you launched a book, Hassan, about things that launch. That's very meta. So I'm excited to read your book as soon as I can get my hands on it. Yeah, as you mentioned, I just had the good fortune and luck of being in the right place at the right time. In my career, I started in consulting, transitioned into outsourcing, spent a lot of time traveling the world, working with incredible talent in markets across the planet, in Latin America, in Europe, in India, in Asia, and then was in the right place at the right time as we were exploring innovative ways to augment, supercharge, and in some cases emulate the work that the teams that I was outsourcing work to were doing. And that came in the form of robotic process automation. And so for the last, I guess, since 2012, I had been playing with RPA, playing whatever role I could in helping champion the space and define the terminology, and also be somewhat of a pragmatist about what it is not, as much, if not more, than what it is, because I think so much energy and excitement was dedicated to overhyping it and having too much of an expectation of its potential. So I spent a lot of time being sort of curmudgeonly and grumpy. And yeah, that was it. And as you said, Hassan, I had the privilege of co-authoring a book on intelligent automation as I sort of opened my aperture and looked at more than just sort of the fingers of the sort of digital revolution, which was the RPA, the execution stuff, and looked at a broader cognitive space. And now I'm sort of in just a sort of a sabbatical where I'm exploring, speaking to as many people as I can, keeping my ears and eyes open, and trying to help understand what's next in the future of work, as much for myself as for other people. So it's thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Ian. So we'll get started with the show. And there is, as always, anywhere in the world, there is some construction going on next to my place. So if you hear some hammering sound, that's not me, right? So, but let's get on with the questions. And to the audience, I think some of you have asked about your questions. So yes, we will get into your questions in about 35 minutes or so, which is from now about half an hour or so. But you can let your questions rip in, and we will certainly bring it up with Ian as the show.
As long as they're easy ones.
Yeah. The tough ones will give Hassan, right? So
Thank you.
Okay, so the first one, and how we collected, of course, is that Hassan and I, of course, brainstorm, and Hassan is a pro with books. He, reads books by the dozen. So you will often find some books being referred in the questions, and other than your book, Ian. So we made sure that we don't have that. Gotcha. But on a serious note, the current situation the world is in, we all know this COVID situation that we are in. It has impacted work, workforce, workplace, everything. We only talk about the workplace part because, of course, that's the most I would say, visible change. People are working from home. Many of us work from home out of choice earlier. Now it is out of compulsion. So the workforce and workplace have shifted significantly and automation has probably accelerated this whole, last 2 years phase. And future of work studies, of course, always show, from 2017, 18 onwards, even last year's studies show that anywhere between 15 to 25% of reduction in jobs involving manual and basic cognitive skills. Even famous authors, Yuval Noah Harari, in his book around the mega trends for next century, he's been saying that these people might end up being in a quote unquote useless category. Right? Nobody is useless, but from a work context point of view, their skills might not be relevant anymore. Right? So that begs the question: what would be your advice? Because you've been in this space for a while now. What would be your advice to a young professional beginning his or her career, knowing that it is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to master all these skills in a limited time?
Sure.
Do you believe that focusing on technology or domain skills or behavioral skills when they start their career, what should they do, to make sure that they are not outdated before they join the workforce? And this is from the younger, yet to start career point
Right.
of view.
No, absolutely. I love this question. I love this sort of line of discussion. Frankly, I posted something a few weeks ago about having presented to my younger daughter's fourth grade class about what I do and what I did, and talking about robots in general, and speaking to them about sort of the future that they might find themselves in as they enter the workforce. And so I was talking to 9-year-olds and telling them that they would be collaborating, and I actually gave them some advice that it was geared towards 9-year-olds, but I think it's relevant as you just sort of notch up the complexity. But I basically said to them, be weird, right? Just be comfortable with being interested in lots of stuff and being kind of goofy and strange. I said, question why things are, question if they could be better, and also hopefully find enjoyment and follow passions in things like coding and math and anything logic oriented. But that's not to say that I think that everyone needs to be a programmer, because I actually think the fear of mass unemployment and job destruction is overhyped. I think there's a difference between the possible and the probable. As far as jobs, it's possible to digitize and automate jobs. Is it probable that they'll all be automated away? I think the answer has proven itself out to be, there's a lower probability. And technology has traditionally created new opportunities. And most of the jobs people have today did not exist 100 years ago. And well, there was a fear back then that we'd all be out of jobs because we wouldn't be working at the looms in the factories like we knew people could do at that time. We found plenty of other things to do. But to get back to your question, Anshuman, it's interesting because often when I talk to kids in college or kids coming out of college, or as we approached recruitment for my RPA consultancy, we were often looking for people who had logical capabilities, science, math, but didn't necessarily want to be coders, right? They weren't software engineers, because those folks want to go on and write lines of code. But we did want to know that people could think logically and in a structured manner. That, I think, is important no matter what you do. But so much of the future of work is also going to lean heavily on a humanity and a design oriented, empathetic sort of mindset that I think is really valuable to explore those areas as well, to have a level of comfort with design thinking, to understand customer experience, to just be able to simply put yourself in other people's shoes in any walk, whether it's product development or service design or whatever else you do. And there are many people who sort of describe these sorts of roles and people as purple people, which I think is colorful and creative, but it's the blue is the sort of logical structured, and the red is more the empathetic human, and the combination of red and blue purple, and I think that's everybody owes it to themselves to dabble in both and respect the importance of each in sort of the roles that will really take shape in the future of work.
Oh, thanks, Ian. I think it's a very optimistic view of opportunities in every color in the spectrum. Okay, so thank you, and this is very useful. Okay, for planning and building careers, especially for students and young career professionals. Okay, we have heard your talks before on opportunities for young career professionals, but it was a revelation today that it can even be for 9-year-olds. Okay, so amazing stuff. Okay.
It was so much fun to talk to them, by the way. And I have these thank you cards from them for having gone in and spoken to the class, and they're hilarious because they've got all these drawings of robots on them, and they say how much I've always wanted a robot, and I'm excited to hear that I'll be working with robots in the future. And obviously that's an oversimplified visual, but it's because it was for 9-year-olds. But it's that human plus robot augmented reality in the future. That's whether that robot is an Amazon Alexa or a chat bot or a cobot or any number of other AI sort of augmented things. That's our future.
Oh, cool stuff. Okay, so yeah, let me move to a slightly different topic. Okay. So I'll share with you an emerging context in India currently, and let me pick your brains, understand your perspective on how you think we should approach it. See, a country like India, okay, a large country, has two interestingly opposite demand and supply numbers. Demand on one side, there is an overwhelming demand for vital services, very crowded hospitals, challenge in access to education, underemployment, okay, the courts taking a lot of time to resolve cases, delays in the judiciary, etc. That on one side, okay, on the demand for vital services, the access to vital services. On the other side, again, there is an overwhelming supply of human capital. Okay, but with very low availability of formal jobs. Okay, informal jobs exist. Okay, where you're not on anyone's payroll. Formal jobs. Okay, for this large supply of human capital for majority of our citizens. Honestly, we don't know how to bridge this gap. Okay, between these two contradictory demand and supply. Okay, and it could be a different view on automation, but according to me, a thoughtless labor substituting automation can only make it worse. Okay, possibly. So the question to you, Ian, is how can intelligent automation help bridge this gap? Okay, for providing the access, okay, to basic services to the vast majority of population, okay, waiting for it, while in parallel, okay, also opening up formal sectors for employment which don't exist today. Okay, so the sharper question is, should India take a pause? First, reimagine its processes in context, okay, before moving forward with automation. What is your thought?
That is not a big or complex question at all. So thanks so much, Hassan, for asking me to to reflect on how to solve this. It's interesting, right? Because I think one of the biggest potential impacts, positive impacts of automation could be to democratize and greatly improve the economies of scale around offering basic services. Right, as you mentioned, if basic services are just simply access to information about healthcare, about your options for just utilities and other information like education and social services, you can automate some of that infrastructure. Now, the automation is predicated on the investment and the prioritization of those those offerings being available to a very large population. So you have to make policy decisions about having access to that, and there's still very human elements, like offering of healthcare can't be mostly robot oriented. You can't have robot doctors yet, but I think you can use automation to reduce the friction and improve the ability and the access to a lot of these basic services. To your point, though, then I think what you need to go is you need to understand that there are resources that the economy has that it can use to support people who may not have the skills right now. There's lots of discussions about the experiments around universal basic income and whether a healthy economy can afford to support people so that we're not all having to work to just have the basic resources to survive. And then the democratization of education should make it easier for a very large and very capable population, in many cases that only struggled with the access to opportunity, not the capability. Giving more people access to opportunity to enter the world of services, I think, will make a world of difference to such a large percentage of the population in India. In my BPO days, we were always talking about tier 1, 2, 3 cities, right? I think thanks to virtualization, perhaps thanks to the silver lining, I suppose, of COVID, making us all more comfortable with virtual and remote working. It doesn't matter where there is no tiered city structure anymore. There's just the infrastructure there to make sure that your computer works, and that you have access to the education and then the opportunity to then have the prosperity to do the work that the world needs you to do. So I don't know if that's going to solve. I mean, India's, as you said, India is a massive country with a lot of people, but giving more people greater access to basic services and then the means to get on the sort of the prosperity train of the future of work could make a big difference. And and the other, I mean, I'd be chagrined if I left this out, but one of the things that India has in spades that it is so well known for, because you asked the question of should you fix the processes or should you automate now? In enterprises, it's a different philosophy. I think you can tinker and innovate, and it teaches you about your process so that you sort of prototype what would be the better end state, and then you get there. India is famous for that sort of creative, innovative fixing and improvised solutions, right? The jugaad innovation that is sort of part of the DNA suggests to me you should incrementally improve and innovate as you go, and don't wait to come up with some ideal process design, because you make a whole lot more impact a lot faster by getting to it now.
Yeah, interesting. It's agile jugaad innovations, and I think you hit it on the nail on all the topics. Okay, the resolving the frictions, democratization of education, and the need to get it iteratively right. Yeah. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
Anshuman? Yeah.
Yeah. So picking on from there, I think so one topic we were brainstorming on is that this, of course, nobody can today escape this life that we are living in. This still I would call the pandemic, because even though there are signs of it waning down, and I'll take the opportunity to remind everybody in the audience that it is not over. Please take care. If you haven't been vaccinated, do that. Your mask, social distancing, hand sanitization, all that. Public service reminder I can make on this webinar, and it is important. I do go out for a walk these days, and I still find people are refusing to mask up in public, right? So you can do that in your home. I don't care, but in public as well. But coming to the question that we wanted to ask you, Ian, is that in the very famous book Black Swan, which talks about this impact of highly improbable, and essentially the author Nassim Taleb then went on to write Anti-Fragile and other books. But the theme that he speaks about is quite relevant, and what we wanted to ask is that some of this, the concept of anti-fragile and robustness is important, but last 2 years has shown us that when COVID hit, revenue streams were cut off, manufacturing difficulties, of course, in the initial phases, it picked up later. Logistics, the semiconductor bit is still going on and may go on for another year, even if once COVID is over. And companies have found it very challenging to even revive basic operations, right? So, which one would think one were taken for granted actually earlier. So, our question around that is that if we can learn anything from this 2 years, apart from, of course, the medical part, and once the crisis is over, is automation the way we know it? Is it a vaccine for this fragile or fragility? And if we inoculate our businesses with more automation, will it help the future, or guard against future shocks?
It's interesting. By the way, I live in Florida, where people don't wear masks anywhere anymore, and you should get vaccinated. I think that's a very important message. I started my year January 1st, I think, by catching COVID, having had my 2 vaccinations and my booster shot. So I've had 3 shots plus COVID. So I'm convinced I'm like invincible now. But yes, take care of yourselves, be safe, be responsible. Do I think that automation is sort of a vaccine? I think it itself is not. It doesn't inoculate us from the chaos that the world's going to throw at us, or the chaos that's in enterprises. But I think what it does help do, right? And I think I said this in the beginning too. People's expectations around the potential outcome, the sort of the magic that is automation, that's going to reduce costs, reduce errors, get rid of having to deal with people, and just make everything straight through and seamless and fast and cheap. It's Hollywood, or Bollywood. It is fantasy, although it's Hollywood because it doesn't have the great dance numbers, but it does have all of the sort of the science fiction around it being a general AI that's going to do everything. What I think it has done for us, though, is it has given us a lens through which to look at ourselves, our jobs, our enterprises, our interactions between enterprises. And it's made us think about the art of the possible as it relates to efficiency. So we are asking ourselves more and more, does this have to be done this way? Can we use automation or various different tools, or simply APIs? Ideally, do we even need to do this step? So I think the lens that automation has given us makes us scrutinize what we do, which should make the operational processes and the way we do things in the future more resilient to any future chaos. And yes, a lot of barriers were broken down. Again, I speak from my outsourcing background, but in outsourcing, if you were servicing a healthcare company or a bank, they were pretty darn certain there was nowhere on earth you could deliver services for them except in that secure facility that they had audited and approved, and only there could your people sit. And then reality hit, and do you want your customers cared for or not? Because I can't get them into that building, so let's be flexible together. And so I think it made for better collaboration between service providers and buyers, at least in the outsourcing space, from my perspective. And it also made us realize that there are different ways to safeguard and make resilient communications and systems and people's access to things. So I don't know if it inoculates us, but it certainly makes our immune system stronger and more adaptable to future black swan events.
Oh, well said, Ian. I think what is very important for the audience to take this lesson from Ian is that Ian is one of the foremost speakers on this topic in the world today. And he's emphatically saying that it doesn't inoculate us, but of course it does help. And it's not the magic wand that many people will sell us. Like most magic tricks, sometimes those are tricks only. This is a slow, steady, more permanent change that automation can bring, and which I thought it was the quick lesson from your points, Ian.
Yeah.
But I interjected a little bit more to remind the audience that it is around half an hour now. Your questions can pop in now, particularly on LinkedIn and YouTube if you are live. I have a little bit of a trouble seeing your questions on the screen, so I will be watching them on my phone, and so will Hassan. So we will pick up, of course, the questions that are, like Ian said, the easier ones, and we'll pose it to him.
Thank
That
you.
was one.
Thank you very much.
Sure. The other reminder, of course, is that if you are watching this and want to, check more similar shows or the stuff that I host on my show, I have put my YouTube channel on the screen. Do take a look. You can find archives of similar shows from the past, not as good as today's, but quite close. You will find archives, and you can, of course, subscribe for future ones, right? So, with that, I'll hand over back to Hassan.
Yeah, thanks, Anshuman. And yeah, Ian, thank you for your response on the question on the inoculations and the vaccines. So when you were responding, I was thinking maybe this is one vaccine which everyone will gladly take up, both with their arms open, okay, and also with open arms. So thank you. Yeah.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and again, and I said at the beginning, I'm a grumpy pragmatist in that all too often, especially in, maybe it's just in the RPA space, where I just saw people being promised magic, and it sounds good, and just naturally we want to believe it, and so I think it's why so much digital transformation is failing these days. It's why those more stats come out about the hardships and the difficulties and the false starts than come out about massive successes. And it's just because this is not easy. And if you think the technology can take it on its own and get things done, then you're not planning correctly. You're packing your bag for a much easier trip than you will actually go on. And so technology is just part of it. You need really strong teams, good processes, good change management, great communications, really clear vision, and shared sort of understanding of your destination, all of that stuff. So.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so yeah, thanks for this. Yeah, very, very true, very relevant. Now, again, on the pandemic, okay, so let us also look at the optimistic side, okay, where there has been a big benefit, okay, for customers, which has emerged from this pandemic, is omni-channel product availability, okay, ability to sit at home and get easier access to products and services. So the consumers or end customers have tasted this, okay, and they're not going to give it up, okay, on the convenient and personalized experiences. I would even say hyper-personalized experience. This also means, okay, for companies, they should start looking at setting up of personalized supply chain models, okay, and which we know not exist today. Okay, the current supply chain models are mass production, okay, at least some 50-year-old technologies, okay, in offshore locations. These are big bottlenecks in establishing personalized, quick supply chains. So the question, Ian, is with automation, intelligent automation and 4.0, etc., do you see those macroeconomic shifts, okay, with factories shifting closer to the markets, okay, very small, agile, and made to order production models, okay, and regional trade flows next to consumer markets? East, will it start producing for East? And West, will it start producing for West? Is the question here with this.
It's an interesting one. And I'm not a manufacturing or supply chain expert, so I'm going to be out of my expertise in guessing. I'll try to guess as convincingly as possible. But yes, I mean, you're seeing things like additive manufacturing, 3D printing, and others that are allowing you to, at very least, prototype domestically, so that you're not having to do prototype runs internationally. And I think what will then happen is you'll be more prone to produce products closer to home. I mean, I drive a Tesla, and Teslas are made in California, of all places, which seem like the most ludicrous place to make a car. But because of robotics, you can do that somewhat more affordably. They themselves admitted they did too much automation and had to tone it back a little bit because it wasn't going as well as they'd hoped. So I think, yes, automation will allow for a more responsive and dynamic manufacturing approach that will allow more bespoke production. And you see it in some markets already. You see it in fast fashion. I mean, heck, I can order shoes, sneakers with my own custom design, and they show up in 2 weeks. and that's a sophisticated set of selections and a sophisticated supply chain to get me my crazy custom made sneakers. The other side of it is, and I hope this isn't a factor, but sort of growing nationalism and challenge of getting talent across borders these days, and the pandemic also throttling travel of any form, may make for compelling business cases to bring some of that closer to home. So that dynamic might also force us to more regional manufacturing again.
Okay. So you want a Tesla closer to your home, Tampa, Florida?
Yeah, California is closer, as long as they can get it to me, right? I mean, the thing is, if I find myself, and our expectations have been set. This is what's so interesting about customer experience, and in that discussion is some players, Amazon is the example in this story, has made me expect things within a day and a half. Right? I buy things that they tell me will be here the same day. Is it fair to then burden every other facet of my life with that same expectation? It's a whole lot harder to keep a warehouse full of vehicles or computers that I can just walk in or have someone deliver to me. But to your point, we expect it, and we expect it now.
Yeah. Fully agree. Yeah. Anshuman, what do you think?
No, I'm amazed that Tesla is still discussing with the Indian government on whether to come to India or not to come to India. So that's of course for another day. But a quick shout out to quite a few questions that have come in already. We will try and take as many as we can, but in a little bit time. I'll ask a question which there is a theme which is repeated in the and I think the construction has picked up in my place. I can assure you it is not my house, but the common walls don't help, right? So, but I'll quickly ask the question. So, the question is around platforms, right? So, most capex and traditional resources models are being replaced by capex in many ways, at least in the digital economy, right?
Right.
Examples being Airbnb, Uber, and any other. Amazon itself is an example of multiple businesses coming together into a platform, and there are businesses which we thought that will never be able to collaborate or work together, but they are also coming together on platforms. So the question, of course, is that do you believe that in this digital world, as we get deeper into this, businesses will end up getting, if I may use the word, platformized with companies and maybe even sworn enemies, leveraging on each other's strengths and make larger markets or more consolidated business models of some kind? So I mean, the sharp question, like to steal a phrase from Hassan, is that is the world being platformized?
I think so. Before I get started, the way to have me on a live stream where there isn't yard work going on outside is to do it at 1 a.m. So I feel good that right now it's 1:08 outside, so no one's mowing lawns and no one's banging on walls. So that's so it's quieter here than it ever is for me. Yes, I mean I think that where I see collaboration and building upon other people's IP proliferating, because there's the very relevant and large examples like Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure and just building on other people's massive cloud infrastructure, and that is making things easier. Big companies who you, as you said, would think are just mortal enemies are realizing just the economic rationale of just using that which is already built, because they've got other places to go. They don't need to build it if it's already been built. But I see it in lots of small ways too, which I think is fascinating in this whole low code, no code space, where so much of early product development and even like fintech unicorns these days are being built on effectively other people's platforms. And so it really is more the solutions and the combinatorial innovation, I guess. It's bringing together pieces that exist, but bringing them together in interesting and new ways to solve problems. That's a great boon to the acceleration of innovation, because you're not spending your time having to reinvent wheels. And so, to your point, that only is sustainable if you don't have to reinvent wheels, but you still have access to the parts of the wheel that you need as you grow, and someone doesn't shut you out from their spokes, or because they see you as a threat all of a sudden. So there needs to be some agreement that platforms will stay platforms and people can use them. But I think it's a huge boon to the speed at which we're going to innovate going forward. And we're moving into new crazy platforms that I'm still struggling to get my head around. But things like the metaverse and Web3 and the whole crypto thing, which I've said about as much as I know just then. But those are platforms that more and more innovation will depend on and build upon. So I think the platformization of the world, in Hassan's words, is an integral part of how we're going to continue to innovate quickly.
Yeah, interesting. So I think this will also lead to some tectonic shifts, okay, in the next few years,
Yes.
across businesses and companies, etc. And like you said, we need to be smart around it. But sometimes, okay, what we see is that even though the writing on the wall is clear, okay, for companies that they need to, like you said, innovate or perish, there are inhibitors to innovation, okay, and the topmost among them, I would say, is the business model gravity, okay, saying that we are the best and dismiss all the external innovations, and also the and assumed within quotes engineering pride, okay, of the internal innovators, okay, believing that they are the best. So yeah, this is interesting. So what's your recommended game plan, okay, for such companies which are continuing in I would say, a paralyzing fear, okay, of cannibalizing their current businesses, to embrace smart cannibalization through automation? What is your recommendation? How can companies start becoming smarter on cannibalizing themselves?
It's somewhat of a brutal statement, but my plan is effectively, if you are afraid of change, you're doomed to stay the same.
Yeah.
And if you stay the same, then you're toast. So thank you very much for staying the same, because you've just sort of opened up a pocket for me to run into and replace you in your
Yeah.
industry. I mean, this isn't kindergarten. We don't have to be nice to each other as enterprises. If enterprises have that resistance to change and not invented here and are constrained by the calcification of their own systems and fiefdoms and policies and a resistance to cannibalize,
Yeah.
then tough, because they will be eaten by someone else.
That's right.
And I again, hearkening back to my outsourcing days, and I saw this and I was frustrated by this every darn day, is, I sold an RPA consultancy to a BPO because of a philosophy that I had and my co-founders had, of the fact that BPOs need disruptive change agents to challenge every convention, everything that they've been doing for their clients for the last several decades. They need something to come in and make them question that reality. And the problem is BPOs, in many cases, are scared to death to question that reality, because they have a safe sort of annuity with renewal, and they know how to price that. It's headcount based. It's based on rate cards with some sort of built-in sort of price increases for inflation and other things, and they don't want to disrupt it.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But if they don't, someone else will. And you will see many a firm fall to new digital upstarts that are willing to be creative and collaborative and constructive about the way that they solution, transition, innovate and transform over the course of a relationship.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, the way you said, okay, either you disrupt, okay, or somebody else will disrupt you. Yeah. So,
Dominance is not guaranteed. Just because you're the biggest today, it doesn't mean very much. What it means is you've got a disproportionate access to resources to be able to defend your position. It's up to you whether you do that or not.
Yeah, agree. And since you touched upon cryptos, okay, so there's an interesting development happening in India, okay, on cryptos. Okay, a week before, okay, the government shared its budget for the year, okay, and the government of India announced its own digital currency.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, where do you see digital currencies going from here? Okay, will each country, okay, like what India did, declare its own sovereign currency, okay, of course, regulated by the country's central banks, or the current model of independent cryptocurrencies, will it continue to form the future? What do you think?
So, again, I don't know a lot about this. I do have a relatively good amount of money invested in cryptocurrencies. And what I do know about cryptocurrencies is they're way too volatile to be useful as means of financial sort of glue between economies and companies right now. I mean, there are stable coins, of course, which try to stabilize that and peg it to actual currencies like the dollar or the rupee. But they're way too volatile. The infrastructure they're built on is way too slow. It struggles to scale. It still struggles with security, and what was the story? Just some 3.6 billion or so crypto Bitcoin was hacked or stolen by some like 30-year-old couple in New York just recently. They were just caught. I mean, and an entire currency class that's known primarily for its relationship with money laundering and fraud, that doesn't necessarily endear existing economies to it. So we've got a lot of work to do to scale that infrastructure, make it more efficient, so it's not sort of burning down our planet to power the mining and the hosting of these things. But there's some really interesting components of it. The security, the smart contracts component of it is really fascinating. I'm doing a lot more reading and taking courses to try to figure out just what the heck an NFT is to determine how that might factor into the way that we transact in all ways, not just weird pixelated pieces of art, but in every sort of business construct. So, I mean, that's a lot of words to say. I don't know, but ultimately there's some interesting benefits to it, but we need to figure out how to regulate it, and it needs to be a bit more stable before it's useful.
Okay, so what you're saying, it fails on all the three boxes. Okay, the operability or scalability, security, on all three. Okay, it is not ready now. Okay, so that's your perspective.
Pretty much. I mean, it's my story, which is these scales are absurd. But in this NFT course I'm taking, the NFT course said, okay, go buy some Ethereum, so that first of all, it's incredibly complex to just you need to open up an account to go buy Ethereum with your dollars, which you can't even do easily in India because Coinbase doesn't function there. And then you got to take that and you got to open a MetaMask, move your Ethereum into your MetaMask, then sign up for OpenSea, to then use the MetaMask money to then buy an NFT on OpenSea. That's not easy. None of that's easy. But ultimately the point is, so I go and buy a bunch of Ethereum, and within the 5 days that I'm trying to figure out how to do all the rest of it, my Ethereum falls by 30%. So the amount of money I started with is now 70% of what I began with. That's, I mean, if that was dollars or rupees or anything else, I mean, that's not comforting. And so yeah, anyway, that's my NFT story so far. I'll update you on whether I figure out how to buy an NFT.
Oh, good. Yeah, we'll wait for it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, Hassan, I think we have a lot of questions.
Okay.
I'm certain, Ian, we can't get through most of them. What I will do, I've kind of picked some question, and for some reason, StreamYard's questions are not working on my screen. Yeah, you can see the questions, right? So,
If you refresh them, I've got them. We'll do a speed round. I'll give like one-word answers to all the questions. What do you think?
yeah, one sentence will do. I'll bring in Vikram's question. Vikram Bhadwar, he's a communication expert and runs his own learning and training organization out of Delhi.
Yep.
His question is: it's easier to bring in automation to large organizations given the budgets. You talked about deep pockets earlier. How do we implement automation for micro businesses or very small enterprises, and of course bring down the costs? Any quick answer for that?
Perfect. No, love that question. Thank you, Vikram. And the answer is, I think what the answer always has been for small and medium businesses, which is standardized, modular, vanilla capabilities. There needs to be modular sort of RPA, just functions to handle talent acquisition, to handle onboarding, to handle payroll, to handle invoicing or supply chain logistics, or any of those components, because there's not a lot new under the sun, and smaller businesses haven't had the wherewithal and the money to bespoke customize all sorts of stuff. So the nice thing is, hopefully, they haven't taken SAP or Oracle or something and built all sorts of custom modules. They're using what they've been able to get off the shelf. Now, perhaps they've also maybe homegrown stuff, or they're just running it on Excel. But so I think the power of some of the more open source or some of the more modular automation offerings could be hugely powerful to small and medium businesses. That said, though, that's a growing class of technology right now, because the RPA vendors that I spent so much time with were going after the beasts. They were going after the big Fortune 1000s to do bespoke projects. With the maturing of that space, we're seeing specialists, we're seeing subspecialty RPA vendors in the energy and utility space or in the HR space. So I think in time, we'll see a great catalog of capabilities that Vikram can choose from to digitize his business. Very much in the same way that you see sort of if this, then that, sort of the low code, no code, sort of combining Zapier and Airtable and Monday and all sorts of other things together to stitch together systems for companies. So
that's a new one, Zapier and Airtable. I will check that out. So those who are not familiar with Zapier and Airtable, of course, Zapier is a extreme automation, desktop kind of automation service, extremely brilliant. And Airtable, of course, is your spreadsheet on many times steroids, so
right.
So you can, so steroids of the good kind, don't get any ideas.
I love how steroids becomes the way we say everything is just more. So
yeah,
RPA was macros on steroids, Airtable spreadsheets on steroids. Everything is on steroids these days.
Yeah, what to do, living in a difficult world. Hassan, you have picked a question from the audience.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there is one from Sandeep Rohela on can intelligent automation impact sustainable development? Is one question. So, if you want to pick that up, Ian?
What do we mean by sustainable development? Do we?
So,
yeah.
Knowing Sandeep, I can a little bit guess. The question is more around being sustainable. Of course, stuff that is kinder to the environment, kinder to society in general, lasts longer, doesn't use too much resources in general. That space.
Also, maybe you can cover the ethical AI part along with that. Yeah.
That's also a couple of people have asked that.
Yeah. The ethical AI one's fascinating. So the sustainable. So one of the things we cover in the book, in Intelligent Automation, the book that I co-authored with Pascal Bornet and Johan Wirtz, at the end of it was we were effectively trying to see the benefits, right? The purpose and the possibility. And so really, sort of in a nutshell, the idea was if you use automation well, you relieve yourself of so much friction that exists in the world. And friction manifests in several different ways. Friction can be in inefficiency, it can be in errors, it can be in fraud. So, medical mistakes, or just straight up bank fraud, and people stealing identities, or just inefficiencies in enterprise processes. If you automate that out, if you remove the friction, and you approach it in a way that's not just going to the, if you don't just use that to buy the CEO a bigger summer house or a nicer yacht somewhere, but if you use those resources responsibly as global citizens with a sustainability mindset, then you can apply it to investing in modernizing education, in supplementing and supporting a more sort of universal access to better healthcare and to better global stewardship. And granted, it's very optimistic and hopeful that humanity will think that way, but hopefully you can sort of unleash a lot of resources to apply them appropriately. Now, I'll sort of segue into the AI and the biases thing for a moment, because I actually had Anshuman, you were on that live audio event that I held yesterday or 2 days ago on diversity and intelligent automation. And it was actually with some founders of a group called Black Professionals in Intelligent Automation, but ultimately diversity of any sort, right? And one of the things that was a concern is that oftentimes those entry-level jobs, the ones that we find to be more automatable, because they're the rule-based, routine, structured, sort of the simpler, just because they're the sort of early stages of a career jobs, those jobs are held by, in many cases, minorities. What I thought was so fascinating is so many of the jobs that were deemed as automatable were the exact same jobs that I had been moving to Latin America, to India, to Eastern Europe in the past, right? In fact, it was just, if you could send it to India, could you then automate it? That was an overly simplistic sort of first lens or filter to look at. So that's where we need to be careful, is it robs an on-ramp to prosperity by taking those jobs away. Now, I don't think it has done that. And in fact, I think India is an incredibly good position, because the folks who are doing the work are at, as the Brits say, at the coal face. Like, nobody knows it better. So nobody is better positioned to improve it and digitize it and then manage that digitization and evolve it and leverage that data to do continuous improvement. Now, as for AI and how algorithms seem to get really racist if you leave them to just learn from 4chan things, that's scary stuff. And we need to, as a civilization, have a plan and have a policing of those algorithms, because otherwise they really do seem to sort of torque towards very specific sort of points of view or approaches to things. And that's
Okay.
just something we got to keep an eye on.
Okay, great. So one more question, okay, from Kamalini on whether some industries are ahead of the race on intelligent automation, and are there any other laggards? Any reason why some are ahead and some are behind?
Yes. It's the answer. Yes. Great question, Kamalini. So there are industries and there are functions. So interestingly, from my experience, HR was a function that was tinkering earlier than others, for a few reasons. One, because I think HR had been underinvested in the recent past. It hadn't received the same investment and upgrades to systems. People hadn't put the Oracles and the SAP systems in for them. Maybe there was PeopleSoft and Workday, but they didn't have that same level of investment. And the second reason was because if we're going to play around with data early on in these pilots, well, at least it's our people's data and not our customers' data. So there was a sense of like, this is a better place to play. So I saw a lot of early adoption of RPA happen in HR functions. across the spectrum. Again, hire to retire, talent acquisition, onboarding, pay integration, payroll, et cetera. And then there's the traditional industries where you just see resource. So banking and financial services, they just have more money than they know what to do with. So they had more pilots than you could count. It doesn't mean that they succeeded with them or they made a lot of progress, but they certainly were in it early and were adopting it, so that we're figuring it out. Other industries like insurance seem to be stuck in the past forever. So that industry is in need of acceleration and help. Healthcare I saw as somewhat of an early adopter. But the reason I saw healthcare adopting is just because at least domestically in the US, a lot of the healthcare industry wasn't able to outsource the back office functions for fear of health information going someplace else, being far away and outside of the country. And so they kept that work domestically, which meant that it was still quite expensive, which gave it a better business case to then start applying automation to digitize some of that work. So they had the incentive to adopt early. So then there are areas like energy and utilities still lagging. And then I will say there was an interesting pivot, which I found myself right in the middle of, where we pivoted from back office to front office. And so there became much more of a fascination on robots in the customer care functions, right? The front office robots. Part of that pivot, to be pretty brutally honest about it, was just because the vendors were excited about selling more licenses to desktop agents, lots of folks in call centers, as opposed to just a few autonomous bots that were sitting in closets that one bot did a lot of work versus now I need one bot for every agent. That's a lot more licenses. So that's why that area took off. But it's still early days as far as how well those agent assist bots are truly assisting agents. So that's another hot area right now.
Look, we are more than an hour now, and I think we will need days to cover some of the questions and to get your time, but I know it's very late for you.
Let's do it. I had a Monster Juice caffeine drink right before this call, so I've got this amount of energy in me. We can keep going.
Okay. I will pick one question and then we will kind of wrap up with your closing comments, and Hassan and I will then summarize. There's a question from Sugato. He works within the life sciences space. I've known him for a while. Like China, India has large data sets with increased digitization. Do we see exploitation of this advantage in India with investments in NLP, ML, along with AI and new kind of hardware, and to create new ways of deploying AI? So basically, he's from the life sciences space, so suggesting that in that space, at least from his background, he knows that there's a lot of data.
Yes.
And what do we do in terms of digitizing using AI and ML in that space?
Right.
Comment. And you did mention that healthcare, life sciences, all these areas are also there. So a little bit more on that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Sugato. I can't speak specifically about India. I guess I'll speak more generally about just the world of work. From my background, again, having been in outsourcing, the back office and the front office spaces suffered from a lack of a large enough homogeneous data set, because all the processes were different enough that there wasn't large data. Now, in life sciences, if you're talking about data around sort of clinical trials or data around in any sort of services industry around customer data, and if we're talking about like Facebook or Amazon or something, then there's oodles of data there, which is relatively homogeneous and can be mined. The challenge has always been the cleanliness of that data. I mean, we've always struggled to achieve big data because we had just lots of data, but it's not really big data until it's um, it's clean and verified and valuable. I still think we struggle with that. Now, I think what's really interesting is we've got some incredibly complex models now that can do interpolations on far smaller data sets that still create insights that would otherwise have depended on larger data sets. And I think that's going to be the future, is making do with less. And then, I mean, this kind of goes back to the first question about the jobs that really will be in the future. Data is where it all is. Data has always been the story. It has always been about data. As we digitize more, I have faith that the data becomes more reliable. Right, IBM had this great V model of big data. It's volume, veracity, value, some other V's I can't remember at the moment. But I think as more of the world gets digitized, the data becomes all of those things. You have more of it. You have better visibility to it. It's all time stamped, less errors, or at least sort of less sort of unanticipated errors. And so I think the real jobs of the future will be a level of comfort with that data and being able to interpret it and do something useful with it, to inform better service design, product design, customer experience, journey mapping, all of that fun stuff. And the likes of India is in the sweetest of sweet spots to develop those data scientists who will be the heroes in the future, because so much of the data is there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that, Sugata, I don't know if that answered your question at all, but data is the new oil. It's all about data. Go data.
I will check with Sugato separately. But look, I think it's fair that we wrap it up, and I will bring in Hassan for some closing comments before I come to you, Ian. A couple of quick points. You were talking about kindergarten earlier, and I am actually reading a book, Mindset, by Dr. Carol Dweck, who writes more about mindset and other things. And she, in one chapter, has said something that reminded me of what you were saying, is that we do a great service to our toddlers and school going kids when we praise them when the praise is not deserving. And this is smack in the face of all that we have been told to be kind and nice and everything.
Right.
And pretty much something similar is happening in the automation space, that a little bit of automation here and there, and we are so overjoyed that it actually does a disservice, right? So that's and it, for the listeners audience, it is a book recommendation as well, Mindset by Carol Dweck. Of course, after you have read Ian's book on intelligent automation.
Course. There's an order of hierarchy here, of course.
Yeah, of course. So there are quite a few other questions which what we'll do is that, Ian, if you have time, of course, you're tomorrow, do visit the LinkedIn page and see if you can answer some of them. Hassan and I will try answer as much as I can. There was an interesting AI question from Bakari Abu Bakar. He's my regular audience from Africa. So hi, Bakari. And we did ask your question in some other way, slightly different way. But with that, let me hand over to Hassan for some closing comment, and then Ian, your turn for closing comments, and then we wrap it up.
Yeah, Hassan? Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Ian, for the session today. Okay, I truly enjoyed the discussion and the conversation that we had, and like what we started at the beginning. Okay, on the 3 areas that we will touch. I was thinking the way you spoke about the careers and companies and countries. You touched upon all 3. Okay, which is great. From a career standpoint, okay, for all the individuals, 9+-year-olds, okay, to build their career with automation, okay, it is very clear, okay, based on what we just heard, that technical and domain skills are important, but the need for creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, customer experience, and ability to handle change, okay, are the facets that was touched upon today by Ian as the must-win skills for future, okay, beyond automation. That's for the first C, the careers. that second and third C, okay, companies and countries to take forward automation, okay, and take forward a transformation strategy with automation. First, we spoke about understand. Okay, start with the understanding of how my country, in this case India, for example, or my city, or my industry, okay, or my company is going to be impacted by automation disruption. Okay, don't just stay back with your inertia and lethargy, okay, and risk aversion and the fear of cannibalization. Somebody else will disrupt you. So understand what's happening in the environment. Take some steps. Okay, it's time to think and start taking the steps. And three, prioritize the efforts, okay, and take these steps with the right levels of priority, okay, is the third prescription, okay, which came from Ian. So in summary, okay, if you had to put it in maybe one or two lines, it's about really delivering a thoughtfully sequenced set of changes. And the tagline is, it's the time to reinvent with intelligent automation. So that's what I would say. And thanks, Ian. So this is a great session. We truly enjoyed the conversation with you.
That was a tremendous summary. I cannot top that. I'll do maybe two or three things. One, I was pulled out. I got these. This is one of the thank you cards I got from the class. Look at that. Look at the art. That's a 9-year-old who wrote sort of thank you for coming and talking about robots. It's hilarious. But no, thank you guys, Hassan, Anshuman. This is awesome. What a great forum. Thanks everybody who joined us and asked great questions, and we will answer those that hadn't been answered later. I will, Anshuman, because you showed up on an office hours with the authors of Intelligent Automation. Look, I have a copy. What we have done, because thanks to your guidance, the paperback book we couldn't change the price of, but the ebook, and I know this is an issue still, but the digital version of this, we've changed the price to 200 rupees. It was up at like 500 or something, so that's now 200 rupees. If anybody wants that, and they can find it if you just Google it or look it up on its website. So hopefully more people can get access to it, and it can be more valuable to more people.
So that's some speed, Ian. I think that conversation was only 3 or 4 days ago.
That's right. That's right.
Just for people in the audience,
we didn't automate it. That was fully manual. That was Pascal Bornet manually going and figuring out how to change the price of that.
I think only 3-4 days ago, and so for people in the audience who are wondering what we are talking about, we were together on a show, Ian's show, and I did mention, and all the three authors were there. So I did mention that the book is still a little bit out of reach from an Indian pricing point of view, and of course, like Ian said, it's very difficult because of publishing and printing rights and everything to change the price of the hard copy and paperback. But the digital print is now reduced to 200 rupees, which I'm sure is well within reach of anybody who wants to know a little bit more about automation in India. So thank you, Ian, for that. And over to you again for some comments that you wanted to make.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only other thing a few things I'll say is it's such a fascinating space, the future of work. I'm spending a lot more time focusing on the worker of the future and the future of work. Exactly the questions you asked of what do people need to know and what do I need to know, right? What are those 9-year-olds who can put really good thank you cards together? What do they need to know to give them the opportunities that are available to them? And importantly, how do we make sure that those with capability have access to opportunity, which I think is a critical component of the future of work, is to bridge the digital divide globally and make sure more people are able to take part in the prosperity that this is creating. And I really am absolutely certain that more jobs will be made, not destroyed. They'll of course be different, but I'm an optimist as it relates to our fate in the future. If people are on LinkedIn and do have, through their companies or otherwise, access to LinkedIn Learning, I currently have 2 classes. One's on Intro to RPA, the other's on RPA and AI and stuff. I did a course on this that will be out and live in another few weeks. I recorded it and we're finishing post-production now. So if you don't want to read the book and you just want to put up with listening to me talk at you for 45 minutes, then that's another way to do it. And I'd invite you to please follow me on LinkedIn, because I love these discussions and I'm sort of exploring these topics constantly. So hopefully you find more of my content useful to you in your journeys as you look to develop skills and to learn from the community. So thank you, Anshuman and Hassan, for giving me this opportunity.
Our pleasure. Our
Excellent.
pleasure, Ian, totally. And look, I was also planning to, end the show with a quick reminder to the audience that Ian has 2 LinkedIn learning courses. And I think one of them you made it free last week, right? So those who are not on LinkedIn Learning
Yep.
as a paid version can also have access, and you can actually um, check out the show.
What we
Uh,
can, sorry to interrupt. What we can do is, because it's free for 24 hours and then it's not again. And I can do that, I think, once a month. So what we
okay,
can do,
so
Anshuman, is you and I'll just coordinate, and in 2 weeks in March, I can make it free again for 24 hours. And let's just
fantastic. Yeah.
let
And
people
that's
know
another reason for
when.
people to follow you, so that, when you do
There we go.
make it free for a day, people can get that alert quickly.
Good.
Look, with that, I'll let you go. Ian, it is late for you. Hassan and I are delighted that we could host you. It's been in the works for some time, but good things take time. So
There we go. That's right.
delighted we could. And there are quite a few thank yous coming on the messages for me as well.
Thanks
So
very much.
glad that we could make it happen. I don't have a summary, mainly because Ian and Hassan have summarized it well. I only have a quick reminder that, like Ian said, if you do want such shows, or want to get alerts on the show, do follow Hassan and me as well. I have a YouTube channel as well, so if you want recordings of these shows, that is easier on YouTube. Live is easier on LinkedIn, like we said earlier. The next show is not next week. Next week is likely to be a break. So 26th of February, which is again a Saturday, 11 a.m. I'll be talking to another qualitist in my qualitist series that I do, talking to quality professionals, which is my original profession. So just trying to keep that profession alive and kicking. Sachin Garg will be the guest on the show on 26th. So, but I will definitely post. So you can join that. So with that, I'll let everybody go. Thank you very much once again, Ian and Hassan, and to my lovely audience. Till next time. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ashman. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Bye.